Jai Hind, welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. As you all can see, I have with me Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain, a strategic thinker, a former Corps commander of the 15th Corps in Srinagar, a writer on very, very important strategic issues concerning national security of this great nation of ours, internally as well as externally. Something caught my eye that he had written some time back, which is the state of Punjab. And that's something that we all know is in a complete condition of turmoil. A lot of us are even worried about it. Thank you, sir, for joining me to discuss this very, very hot topic of Punjab and what you see in it, having served there, having seen the previous turmoil that the state went through as well, and the upcoming future.
Well, thank you, first of all, for inviting me for your show. And Jai Hind to all our viewers. Yes, I had the pleasure, honor of serving with my unit way back in 1990-91 in Punjab at the heyday of militancy, terror of that time. I was deployed in one of the very, very challenging areas near Taran, Valtoha, the area of Bhiki Wind. That's where the whole fortress was, virtually, you can say. And one had the opportunity and occasion to observe very, very closely the response of the people. It is my opinion always that it is the people of Punjab who defeated militancy and terror in Punjab in the 80s. And I always continue to believe that this was done for a purpose. It was a precursor to Jammu and Kashmir. It was played out in a manner that it was like a dress rehearsal. Pakistan was in the throes of handling Afghanistan. If you remember, in the 80s, they had made the overall plan of launching proxies against India. But the ground, perhaps, in Jammu and Kashmir had not been sufficiently prepared. But they found that Punjab itself was presenting itself virtually to the Pakistani deep state. And that is how they got into it, handling Afghanistan on one side with the Soviet presence there on the west. And they chose to use proxies in the Indian state of Punjab in the east. And apparently they could balance this together, both these things together. They found perhaps Punjab comparatively simpler at that time. First of all, a commonality of culture it was very easy with culture, language, etc., communications and things like that. And they also knew that Punjab is India's virtual, it may not be physically the heartland, but it is in many ways the heartland of India. It is the agricultural capital of India in many ways. It is here that India has withstood many invasions from the west, which have come through this area of Punjab, and the Punjabis have stood up to that. In many ways, the security and defense of India has been here, and therefore cultivating a separatism and insurgency and terrorism in this state was something that the Pakistanis felt that if they could do it, it would be remarkable. It would be a great way of getting back against India after what had happened in 1971 as far as East Pakistan was concerned. Yeah.
I think you've brought out my first question very, very beautifully, sir. You know, the K2 policy that they had adopted after 71, and it is Bhutto's very famous words sitting in a press conference somewhere in Lahore, saying that he will create another Bangladesh on this side of the border for India.
But if I may go a little beyond, Aadi, Pakistan always believed, surprisingly, that the security of East Pakistan actually depended on West Pakistan. Activation of the Western Front somehow gave security to the Eastern Front. Now, what is this awkward thing? They always felt that they were very weak on the Eastern Front, but they were very strong on the Western Front, and that they could confront India, they could take on India virtually on equal terms. That is why, if you see today, Pakistan continues to believe and continues to spin this particular belief that it never lost the war of 1971, that it was incidental that they lost the territory of East Pakistan because the terrain was against them, the situation was against them, the people were against them. Now, this is the spin which has been given to this whole idea. And they felt where Pakistan was strong, it withstood everything against India. That's in the West, not realizing, of course, that the Indian armed forces, the Indian state, never put its focus on the West. There were no major operations conducted in that manner for deep thrust or for destruction or things like that. The whole idea was to confront in the East. But this has gone into the psyche of the Pakistanis. They felt that in 65 they didn't lose the war. That is why if you see 6th of September every year, they have Victory Day, which they celebrate as victory over India in 1965. And then they have spun this tale among their people that 1971 we never lost the war. So the idea continues to remain in the mind that India is vulnerable in the West. This complete western border, India is vulnerable. And Pakistan need not play the conventional game. It can play the hybrid game. It can play a combination of other games together to keep India engaged very, very negatively, so that India cannot achieve its true aspirations as a nation, as a united India. Always some element of separatism will always be present. This is the whole idea of Pakistan.
Instability is as simple as that. I think that's,
Yeah.
on their part, it's quite wise. You know, but if you also explained that the last time the Pakistanis started something in Punjab was a similar situation when they were involved in Afghanistan as well, and we see that right now. So history is kind of repeating itself, and you know, I think
I think that needs perhaps a slight explanation, in the sense
please.
the the Pakistani perception, to my mind, appears to be that the situation in Afghanistan has been turned around to their advantage. This is their perception.
There, yes.
I don't believe in it. I think the situation hasn't turned around at all. The Taliban are their own masters, and they may not be listening to Pakistan far too much, although Pakistan is always the mouthpiece of the Taliban internationally, if you observe. But the fact remains that they think that the situation is to their advantage, and therefore this is the time which is ripe for them to switch sides, or if nothing else, balance it out. Otherwise, Jammu and Kashmir, the K2 which you talk about, Jammu and Kashmir, they're losing out perhaps. Since the 5th of August 2019, traction has reduced. There is ceasefire on the line of control, and apparently the Indian side is getting the better of the situation overall. And in Punjab, they feel that they have got the old time networks probably still prevalent. They have been attempting to try and create caches with the weapons being supplied through drones, etc. And they feel that they just need to continue cultivating the situation there. And in the near future, Punjab will start burning. It will ignite itself and start burning on its own. This is their perception, perhaps, and they feel that the spread of Jammu and Kashmir into Punjab, this elongated border of Western India, is going to be a tremendous advantage to them.
Interesting, sir. You know, is it that they're trying to create a diversion for India not to kind of thrust forward or create some sort of a challenge for them when they're at the weakest point as well, sir?
Well, if we take our minds back to, say, around about 1977 or so, when Ziaul Haq came to power, I think one of the things which the army at that time was waiting for, you see, after the loss of 71, it is Zulfikar Bhutto who came to power. There was civilian control over the army. 6 years the army waited, and 1977 they came to power. Ziaul Haq, one of the first few things which probably started in Pakistan was the idea of revenge, the idea of retribution again for what had happened in 1971. As you very correctly said in the beginning itself, for what happened in East Pakistan, let's look at the West now. So this idea was cultivated by Zia at that particular time, and they realized that conventionally, perhaps getting the better of India was not going to be easy. Economically, it was not going to be easy. The only way that Pakistan could really compete against India, or from a security angle, bring India down, was through what is called the thousand cuts, the war by a thousand cuts, and that would be a hybrid in nature. It would be long drawn out over a period of time. It would be anywhere, wherever it was possible, not necessarily Jammu and Kashmir and Punjab. It could be anywhere. So, as you very correctly say, instability in India would be something which would be working to the advantage of Pakistan. Yeah.
Actually, I'd just like to take this, instability in India to the advantage of Pakistan one step forward before we get into, couple of things that we spoke about the weapons and drones and stuff like that. With the ongoing standoff with China in the north as well, it also gives an opportunity for the Pakistanis to take some undue risks and looking at the factor that they probably are in an advantage where the escalatory ladder options that the Indians would have would be much more limited, having that the Chinese are sitting on one front. Do you feel that is something that they are also considering when they're trying
very well described. Your understanding and perception, I entirely endorse. You see, the situation since 2020, April 2020, with what happened in Ladakh, to my mind, was all about. It was nothing to do with war fighting. The Chinese have no intent of doing war fighting. The Chinese intent, to my mind, has always been cautioning India, uh, putting a doubt in the minds of the Indian leadership, in the Indian armed forces, that they should not get overambitious, they should not get too confident, because the way things were going from 2015 onwards, perhaps, small decisions which were being taken by the government of India, which had not been taken in the past, right? Simple thing like Doklam, holding on at Doklam, simple things like the surgical strikes or the Balakot strike and things like that, was giving India a surging confidence, strategic confidence, which the Chinese were not happy about, and which the Pakistanis would definitely not be happy about. One day a surgical strike, the next time Balakot, I don't know what would happen the third time. This is what the Pakistanis would be probably perceiving. So the escalatory ladder, which you correctly say, it was to arrest the escalatory ladder. And with the Chinese presence there now, definitely the escalatory ladder, there's a bit of a caution built into the escalatory ladder. The other aspect which is important to remember and understand is that the Chinese today are looking towards their own interests in Afghanistan, which is in terms of minerals, in terms of the communication arteries, the Belt and Road Initiative, the new great game, which is continuing as far as influence is concerned, preventing the possibility of the influence of Islamic radicalism stepping into Xinjiang and things like that. For all this area is a relatively lesser known area to China. They are looking for guidance from Pakistan. And this is where the collusion between Pakistan and China is increasing by the day. And therefore, the stakes for China are higher today as far as a potential escalatory ladder rising up today to a higher level of response by India. So, keeping all this in mind, definitely the situation is quite different to what it was in 2019 when we struck at Balakot.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with you that it may not be trying to protect Pakistan, but it may also be trying to protect its own interests. And in the interim, if Pakistan has also benefited, fair enough. It's not something
absolutely
that the Chinese would be averse to. So, one of the things that you mentioned with the amount of money, the weapons, and the drugs which are coming in from the drones. Drugs, fair enough. We understand it gets distributed in the market, and we know that Punjab's youth is actually, in the midst of an epidemic, if I may put it that way. Where is the weapons and the explosives going to? Because we haven't had an incident of a gunfire or any such insurrection of any sort, for that matter. Is this being stockpiled, and if it is, for what?
Very, very interesting question. And that brings us to the description of what is hybrid war. Hybrid conflicts are not necessarily only kinetic. Kinetic warfare is an element of hybrid war, there's no doubt. It forms one of the core elements, in fact. Now, if you go to Jammu and Kashmir, I remember in the heyday of militancy and terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir in the 90s, I used to always ask, where does all this explosive come from? Where are all these weapons and ammunition coming from? Each time we kill terrorists, you find loads and loads of ammunition. They got enough weapons. When we go to the field ordnance depot in Badami Bagh and we see the thousands of captured weapons, and you wondered, my God, we've already captured so many, and yet they've got more. The answer which used to come to me was, the whole of Jammu and Kashmir is a cache. The whole of Jammu and Kashmir is a cache. It's been built up over a period of time. It's been buried in nooks and corners. There are all kinds of jungles and folds in the ground and places like that. It's not easy in a place like Jammu and Kashmir. You can hide things anywhere. And that's where all this has gone. And I believe that today, of course, they have run out of it to a great extent, because we find terrorists today with smaller weapons. A group of 3 terrorists or 4 terrorists will only have 2 AK-47s or 2 pistols or something like that. But in the heyday, this was not true. So it's not difficult hiding weapons. It's not very difficult hiding weapons. They can creating caches. They can always be hidden in caches from place to place. But it's not important to only talk about weapons here. The aspect of drugs has been very important. Pakistan has done this consciously. You see, when it withdrew its hand from Punjab in about 1990, 91. 91 is around the time when they withdrew the hand from Punjab. When they realized things are happening in Jammu and Kashmir, they realized that they could not handle both of them together. It was difficult. Or you see, on one side, the Afghan civil war was also raging. Najibullah, if you remember, was very much in power there, and there was a civil war raging there. Pakistan had its interest there. It had its interest in Punjab here. It had its interest in Jammu and Kashmir. Now, with the new situation emerging in Jammu and Kashmir, they withdrew their hands from Punjab and they stepped into Jammu and Kashmir, because that's where the new situation, the proxy war, the proxies were all being trained, etc. And opportunities were emerging there.
True.
Right? Especially after the virtual Holocaust of the Kashmiri Pandits, which was a very successful thing done by them. They probably felt that they've achieved a tremendous amount, and this is going to spur the future militancy and terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir. Right? So this is what it was, and this is how when they took their hands off Punjab, they realized that they just can't stop. Punjab must continue to have some kind of a capability, or they must have the capability to come back to Punjab, to trigger Punjab again. Now, how do you do that in these kind of situations? You always leave behind networks. Like exactly in Jammu and Kashmir, they have got very, very good networks, which the government of India now has been targeting in a big way, and quite successfully also. But over the years, the networks had been built up in Punjab. Sleeper agents were there. Caches were probably there. Those caches still probably remain quietly there. They may emerge one fine day. We never know when that happens. But drugs was the most important thing. In India's virtual #1 state, which was providing high energy levels of agriculture, a very high footprint in the armed forces of India, suddenly this so-called #1 state of Punjab was suddenly going, awkwardly, in a very awkward kind of a spiral, where you were finding that young people were not even good enough, physically fit enough to join the armed forces. No, that has been a very successful ploy by Pakistan. And somehow we could not do enough to stop it, although today a lot is happening. I think we have got the better of the situation today, but a lot is being done on it. But lots more needs to be done. That just only exemplifies that hybrid war is about lots and lots of different domains. You see, the domains of caches, the domains of weapons, the domains of ideology, the domains of drugs, the domains of militancy and separatism. I mean, these are all combined things. And the state which is subjected to it, like Punjab in this case, or India in this case as a nation, may focus itself on 1, 2, or 3 things, but not on everything.
True.
And that's where the challenge lies, because half the time in hybrid war, the hybrid conflict, the all of government approach is not followed. All the domains are not addressed, and somewhere one of the domains rises. particular case happened in Punjab where the drug domain itself almost paralyzed Punjab.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, true. And as a matter of fact, would you also agree that most of the times when we are dealing with something like this, our reactions are more reactive? We are more reactive to situations
Yes,
rather than
yes.
proactively being able to identify
Any
what those guys
state,
are doing.
very, very right. Any state which decides, any country, nation that decides to launch such operations against its neighbor or anyone else, obviously the one who's taking the initiative is always going to be riding high, like the Russians in Ukraine today, right? So the state which is being subjected to it will always be responding. And this is a typical thing in hybrid conflict that is happening in Jammu and Kashmir. Half the time we are responding to situations. Most of the
True, absolutely, sir. So, I'd like to go into Punjab itself internally. And in your opinion, what are the factors that the Pakistanis are kind of taking advantage of in terms of the state, its machinery, its people, and any other factors that you would like to see? Because I feel that it's being presented to them on a platter.
well, from an analytical angle, I would say uh, to have a successful insurgency, militancy, terrorism. These are euphemisms at the moment. I mean, we really can't differentiate between them. There are a couple of factors. Number one, the people. Number two, the resources. Number three, separatism, ideology, right? Uh, Weapons and technology, as you may say, a cause. If there is a cause as such, all these things put together, and foreign support, proxy support coming
Mm.
from abroad. When you put all these together, it becomes a lethal combination, which leads to the kind of situation which happened in Punjab earlier, and which happened in Jammu and Kashmir, and continues to happen in some ways in Jammu and Kashmir still. Now, when if you look at Punjab from that angle, the people of Punjab, I don't think there's any separatist ideology existing among the people. But it is existing in certain bits and pieces here and there, in certain ideologues. There is a tremendous amount of foreign effort to cultivate. It's happening from Canada, it's happening from UK, it's happening from the United States. There's money flowing in from there all the time. There are financial conduits. This is something you need to take control of. This is exactly what happened in Jammu and Kashmir, and we were delayed in our response in Jammu and Kashmir. I would say the Indian state only went after the financial conduits as late as 2016-17, and so very, very effectively they did it subsequently. But before that, there seemed to be a free hand. So all this is happening in Punjab at the moment. Then fractious politics. Fractious politics is something which leads to that. Now, politics is fractious everywhere, anywhere you go. But it can't come down to the levels where fractious politics is all about life and death. Now, that is what is happening in Punjab in many ways. And that can't be allowed to happen. So, in many ways, these are the things which keep happening. Oh, you got a very effective police force in Punjab. After all, Punjab police is also in combination with the people of Punjab is the one which defeated militancy and terrorism in Punjab, right? So you have the advantage. You got people who are loyal, who are nationalist in their outlook. You have a police force which is effective and good. The unfortunate thing is bits and pieces of ideology, bits and pieces of financial commitments which keep coming in, and this very, very fractious politics which promotes all this kind of understanding among people, or attempts to try and garner support from the people. So these are the elements, and foreign support, as I told you. So Pakistan is taking full advantage of it. So when you put all these factors together and weigh them, you realize that yes, this is a tailor-made kind of a situation for proxy conflict supported from an external power somewhere. So it's just a revisiting of what happened in the 80s, ended ultimately in 1991. And it's happening because Pakistan is probably confident that it can handle both Jammu and Kashmir and Punjab together. It was not confident of handling this
Earlier.
together before. And this extension, that means it's an extension from J&K, right from um, the northern gullies of Kashmir and leading right up to Firozpur and Fazilka. I mean, that's half the border between
Yeah,
India and Pakistan.
absolutely, yes. Large space.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you this, is it that the Pakistanis are instigating this or they're playing it up? Which one would you bet your money on?
At the moment, I'll keep a balance between the two. They're doing both.
Hmm.
They're doing both. They're instigating. They're instigating it a lot. After all, lots of these people who wish to play a role in Punjab do live in Pakistan and do live internationally somewhere else. They are there, but without some kind of material support, some kind of an ideological support, uh, for elements to survive in the state of Punjab in India is not easy. So obviously you've got some financial support probably coming in, some drug related support which is coming in. Drugs could be sold, and that could
True.
come to the support of the separatists and things like that. So it is a combination of both. Yeah,
I think I'd agree with you on that. So, being an opportunistic and as well as just poking something, if
yeah.
it lights up, fair enough. Why not? You mentioned the international support that the Pakistanis have been able to get, and we know the names. Everybody knows where they are, what they're doing, and stuff like that. There are two questions that everybody asks, any nationalist would ask: why aren't we doing anything about them? And how have they kept these guys alive for such a long time with the kind of support that the Pakistanis have been able to provide them?
You are basically alluding to the overall international
Support,
kind of a
yes.
support that the Pakistanis managed to get for their cause, for what they are trying to cultivate in Kashmir and in Punjab. That's exactly what you're trying to say. Well, as I said, foreign support and then diplomatic support, international diplomatic support, is something which is very, very important in this kind of a game which Pakistan is attempting to play. Uh, Pakistan is quite adept at it. They have fair experience in doing this. Uh, First of all, they've got the right structures to do it. They've got this organization called the Inter-Services Public Relations, the ISPR, which is now fairly experienced in doing this. And I think they play hand in glove with the Foreign Ministry and the armed forces, etc., to put together these packages. One of the things they are very good at is going to international capitals of importance. For example, many of the capitals of Europe. For example, Berlin, Brussels, Rome, Paris, London. Then you go to Canada or you go to the United States, important cities where diaspora, Pakistani diaspora is existing. And they've got a set of narratives which they play out, right? Narrative is nothing but a story told with an element of a rationale which is in support of the Pakistani cause, right? And for very long, Pakistan is known to have hired lobbying companies in the United States. Uh, well before India went into it very, very late. Pakistan had started this much earlier. So Pakistan's influence game, the game of influence operations, was well in place even before India started at any time, right? And thereafter, we have, well, we are, for example, the what happened on 5th of August 2019. I think our Ministry of External Affairs played out a very good game
Hmm.
of cultivating the Indian narrative internationally, and you found that while even the OIC didn't support Pakistan in what Pakistan was attempting to do, but at the same time, with what Pakistan has done in all these years, none of these countries are seen to be negatively kind of focused on Pakistan, right? We Everyone knows that what happened on 26/11 happened from Pakistan. What happened on 13/12 in against the parliament attack happened because of Pakistan. Everyone knows that 9/11, the origins of 9/11 lies in Pakistan. It all starts from there, right? But despite all this, no one in the world, none of the countries in the world, they they may make awkward statements here and there against Pakistan, but when it comes to an official statement, when it comes down to taking black and white action, no one is willing to do it. One of the reasons for it is that Pakistan's geostrategic location is of prime importance. It's located at a very, very important place for the access to Central Asia, for China to get access to the Indian Ocean, flanking Iran, balancing out the Persian Gulf deployment with the Pakistani deployment to sandwich in Iran together. All this is very, very important for Pakistan. And that's one of the reasons why you find the international community hesitates in naming and shaming Pakistan at most times. Because of this factor, we need to perhaps redouble our efforts. Our efforts are there, but we need to do much more. We need to increase our presence perhaps in many of these important capitals of not only Europe and America, but in Southeast Asia, which are very, very important countries now today in the Central Asian republics, because that's where the new great game is all being played from. Good thing, the government of India is conscious of it. Now, for example, the step that they have just taken of inviting the 5 heads of state, heads of government of the Central Asian republics for the Republic Day, as guests of honor on the Republic Day of India on 26th January. I hope that comes through. It will be a superb step. We've done this with the Southeast Asian countries a couple of years ago, 4 years ago, when we invited all 10 of the heads of state and heads of government to come and be guests of honor on our Republic Day. These are the kind of gestures which must continue to do so. Right, a little out of the box, and fortunately, the government of India today is looking at these in a out of the box method. That is one of the reasons why we have been, to some extent, been able to counter the Pakistani narratives being played out internationally. Yeah.
So, coming to the final edge of this interview, and I'm having quite a bit of experience at your end, and I'm sorry for using the word quite a bit because there's quite a large experience, as a matter of fact, in counterinsurgency and troubled regions, if I may just loosely use that term. What would you recommend today if somebody asks you from the government, what should we do to stabilize Punjab, leaving the whole BJP Congress politics aside, because I don't think that is going to improve in any time, but internal stability and the people, which is something that played for India last time. How would you kind of attack those?
Well, my number one priority would be political consensus, which I know is a dream. It's a dream, right? It happened last in 1994, right, when all the parties came together to pass the resolution on Jammu and Kashmir in the parliament. Both houses of parliament came together. If you remember, 22nd of February, that the whole of Jammu and Kashmir belongs to India. It's that kind of a consensus that one dreams of. But I know it's not easy. It's not going to happen so easily. Politics are going to be fractious. Now, if with fractious politics of this nature, I would strongly, of course, intelligence has to. Now, these are only not exactly preventive, but largely preventive. Our intelligence agencies have come of age. They have come of age. We will have to start looking at Jammu and Kashmir and Punjab as a continuum. We should not treat them as two separate entities, because this is increasingly becoming it is becoming a continuum. If you see Pathankot, Kathua, the area of Samba stretching up to Gurdaspur, this area has become a virtual commonality, right? The same drones are flying in here. Sometimes infiltrations are taking place. Some years ago, you were finding strikes taking place in the Gurdaspur area, terrorist strikes taking place in the Gurdaspur area. So we need to treat this area very, very carefully. Of course, there is no doubt about it that intelligence is one of the most important things, but as important as intelligence in this is the aspect of control over finances. Because if money dries up, in the hands of the people, the wrong people, then automatically things start changing. Now, it's not easy again. You need strong intelligence for that itself. Right? You need strong intelligence for that itself, because much of it comes as fake currency, much of it comes as cash, the common border. We've got a fencing there, but despite that, you have packages being thrown across the fence and things like that. Then, of course, control of human resources. When we were on the Punjab, when we were deployed in Punjab as the army, the first phase of my deployment, I remember, was not in counter-terrorist operations against the villages and the towns. We were on a counter infiltration mode. We were on the Ditchkam Bandh, and ahead was the BSF, and we were in the second tier behind to stop the possibility of weapons, money, drugs, or anything coming in like that. And we were reasonably successful. It happened over about 3 months or so. If it has to come to that, I don't think we should hesitate from actually doing it. If necessary, we can use whatever force is required, but we must do that. We cannot allow these kind of caches to build in. We can't allow the families to come in and things like that. Then an outreach, essential thing is a political outreach, a social outreach to the people, reminding them of the duty to the country, reminding them of the history of Punjab, reminding them of their loyalty to the nation. Um, I mean, the Sikh community, the Hindu community of Punjab, reminding them of the historicity of how they fought out the national movement and things like that. All this is an essential part of it. Building up nationalist fervor there, and making it a people's movement, preventing this happening within Punjab. It should not be that the people say, "Okay, I'm not, I'm not for separatism, but I will not sort of support the army or support the police, etc. Why should I get involved?" It should be the people who said we have to be involved. It is the people who have to say no to terrorism. They have to say no to the separatism, and this outreach is important, very, very important. Who can do it? The political community can do it in a great way, right? The clergy can do it. I'm not sure how the clergy is in Punjab today. I am not personally not aware. I have a lot of friends who keep briefing me about it. Can we sort of garner the services of the clergy to be able to do it? Because just like I say, in Jammu and Kashmir, if you want to put an end to radicalism, you have to get the services of the moderate clergy from the rest of India, Muslim clergy, and take them to Kashmir, and they are the ones who have to do the outreach there. Can we do the similar things in Punjab? I'm not sure. This is something that we could always discuss. So similarly, many of the things that you've done in Jammu and Kashmir, many of the things you've done in Nagaland, here we have got institutional memory of most of the measures that we have taken. I don't think there are many countries in the world who have got this kind of experience fighting insurgencies. So I think all these steps will and should prevent the initiative going into the hands of Pakistan and allowing it to build its own narratives in the manner that it wishes to do with the people of Punjab.
I must say, it's a hair-raising discussion that I've had right now, because it just tells us that, we are vulnerable, no matter how much more stronger militarily or economically that we get from this, um, you know, inconspicuous neighbor of ours. But it's still going to keep on trying to create trouble within India, because probably it's a very simple case of uh, just having something to do for that particular establishment, because just to keep its own relevance, I guess. Having said that, it does affect us, and it's a sad story to see when you see this happening to the bread bowl of India. I've personally studied for 4 years during the heights of militancy. As a matter of fact, 93, 92 onwards, I was there in Chandigarh. We used to go with a Sten machine carbine as kids. Two of those chaps, guarding us to school and stuff like that. So we've seen Black Hat Commandos standing on those those hand pump buildings that they used to have and stuff like that. So it's a memory that we as youngsters, or approaching middle-aged people, have of that very, very beautiful nation and very, very nice and warm people. I hope
that is something which Adi, that is something which I agree with you entirely what you say. My experience has also been that I've lived in Punjab when it was the heyday of peace, and I've lived in Punjab when it was in an absolute shambles as far as security was concerned. And I don't want to see Punjab ever again in that manner. I don't want to go around Punjab with a quick reaction team with a weapon in my hand and seeing people with weapons in their hands. No, Punjab is not meant to be like that. Punjab is a
fun place.
I would love to go to the Golden Temple. I would love to do a matha teko there. I would love to sit down and listen to good Gurbani is there. I would love to have the Kada Prasad from there. And I would like to go to Gurdwaras all over Punjab. That's one of my favorite things to do. I would love to do all this kind of thing. Punjab is one of my favorite states, and I want to see it. I want to see it peaceful and stable. always.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. As you mentioned, by the time we left, it was such a prosperous place. People used to be happy. Everything was, different, and within a span of 3 to 4 years. So that's something that we should hope for. And I guess the government of the day today is going to try and resolve the political indifference in
Absolutely.
that place and bring this wonderful state and its very warm people to some sort of stability and growth once again. Thank you, sir, for this very insightful talk. I think this is going to be a topic that we're going to be discussing more and more coming in the future. I hope we discuss it in a very positive way rather than what we are discussing today. But till then, sir, Jai Hind, and thank you so much.
Jai Hind, and thank you.